Well, let's bring in Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, great to see you. Well, the way that Congressman Turner handled this was alarming. And I ask you, what's going on? And is he trying to push Speaker Johnson and the Republicans to vote on this $60 billion Ukraine aid package, or the full $90+ billion aid package, because he's in favor of that?
Well, first, it's good to be with you. Let me say this. I was in the SCIF today. I read the intel report. Nothing I read is going to cause me to vote for that Senate supplemental package of $90 billion, which funds Ukraine and a bunch of other areas while our southern border is unsecured. I think specifically to the threat that was disclosed in that report, I think that's something that the White House and the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, they need to continue to track and make sure they have a handle on. But is it going to cause members of Congress to change their position on Ukraine or on the reauthorization of FISA? No, it will not.
You know, Congressman, Mike Turner is a serious guy. I served with him when I was in Congress, and it's odd that he would go outside of the Speaker's office, wouldn't coordinate with Speaker Johnson, and he releases a statement. And it does beg the question, you've seen the intel, is this something that the country should be concerned about, that we should know about, or was there some other political motive behind Turner releasing this information? Was it to really motivate Republicans to vote for Ukraine funding?
Oh, look, I'm not going to speculate on that. But what I will tell you is if there's anything that concerns me is whether or not Joe Biden's up to the job.
Yeah.
Because what I read in that report, if you look at all the other issues going on around the globe, that's the far more critical question for the American people is, can he do the job of securing this nation? He has failed in that on a number of issues. And so that's my overarching concern. But I think that having members read a report in order to, gauge or change their sentiment on packages that we're going to vote for on the floor, I got a real problem with that. That's something that members are going to have to speak with Chairman Turner about, and we'll figure that out amongst ourselves.
Moving on to this, Janet Yellen's army of spies testifying in front of the House Financial Services Committee today, on which you sit, after confirming that they have been spying on bank transactions of conservatives. Listen to this, Congressman.
What I understand is that the overwhelming focus of this information was on violence.
Was what?
Violence. It was sharing key terms around acts of violence, words.
Bible, our gun purchases. I'm trying to understand here. These are legal purchases. These have nothing to do with terrorism.
What were they up to? And have they even stopped?
They were up to the thing they've been doing, frankly, through many aspects of the government, spying on the American people, in a lot of respects, suppressing the free speech of the American people. That's what this Biden administration has been doing for the last 3 years. It is lawless. It is not respectful of the privacy of the American people. It disrespects the Constitution. This is one element of it. Dagen, remember, this is the same administration that wanted to spy on the bank accounts of every American. They wanted to look at your transactions if you had transactions in the aggregate over $600. That's the Biden administration that wanted to do that. That's the Treasury Department that wanted to do that. I don't trust these people. They need to, frankly, their funding needs to be examined and scrutinized the same way we're going to scrutinize FISA and the intelligence community. Because you cannot have a government that is openly spying on the American people just because they decide that they want to view you as a threat today. That flies in the very face that the American Revolution was fought on.
No doubt, and we played the clip there of Congresswoman Ann Wagner asking that question. And again, the witness is saying this is about violence. And she made the good point. The Bible? Violent? What this is really about is not violence. It's about targeting political opponents of Joe Biden. And if you can target those political opponents using the state, that's massive power. So after this hearing, Congressman, what's the next steps? How do we curtail and snuff out this use and abuse of power against conservatives and their transactions?
Well, look, I would actually communicate to the Speaker and to the other members of Congress. There's this funding deadline that's coming up March 1st, a secondary one on March 8th. We should be doing everything in these appropriation packages to tie the money on these agencies if they have been spying on the American people. This is outrageous. And this is not politics. I think overall the American people need to understand we can have political disagreements. We could support different people for president and for U.S. Senate governors, etc. But the government cannot be wielded as a tool against political opponents. Once it does that, there is a lack of respect for our institutions, and it destroys the very pillars of the greatest country man has ever known. We cannot tolerate that. That should be not a bipartisan thing. That should be a nonpartisan position of every member of Congress up here on Capitol Hill.
And violates the guaranteed individual freedoms that make us so unique as a republic laid out in the Bill of Rights. So Alejandro Mayorkas racking up all the titles, worst Homeland Security Director of all time, and second worst ever cabinet member. Well, second ever cabinet member to be impeached. We're going to call him the WOTE worst of all time. Where does this go from here? Because it's done. Mark Green, fellow congressman, had an editorial in the Wall Street Journal today who went through the legal basis for it. But now the Senate Democrats, they can't ignore it, and they will have to talk about this man of a disaster reporting to a bigger disaster doing the bidding of Biden.
Well, look, let me first say, it's almost like a sports organization. If your coordinators are terrible, it's usually because your head coach is terrible. And ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden is the worst president this country has ever seen, and he hired a terrible staff to boot. That's number one. Number two, the Senate does need to answer this. There's going to be a trial in the Senate. They need to do the right thing and actually follow protocols of how you handle impeachments, not just try to throw it under the rug because they don't want to deal with the facts that Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas, they broke the southern border. Our cities are hemorrhaging with illegal immigrants in our country. Our cities are overwhelmed. They don't have the resources to take care of all these people, and violence is erupting in so many of our major cities. Nobody should be tolerating this. That's why he deserved to be fired, and the Senate needs to do the right thing and follow through and not play politics.
So, Congressman, this all revolves around his lack of willingness to secure the border, not follow American law. The Senate sent a bill over, $95 billion for funding for Ukraine and Israel. We've talked a lot about that. What's the strategy in the House? Are you going to repackage a funding bill on those issues attached with H.R. 2, which is your strong border security bill? Or what are you guys going to do in response to that Senate bill and border security?
Well, those are discussions happening right now on the Hill. The first thing I will tell you, that $95 billion bill that the Senate wants us to vote for, it's not going to happen in the House. We're not even going to really deal with it at all. I think what we should do is make sure that we take care of Israel. We fund their priorities. They are our ally. They were attacked on October 7th. We should stand behind them 100% and demonstrate to the world that we will always stand with Israel. That's number one. Number two, we definitely have to be focused on border security. Whether it's Ukraine or the federal government itself, the message has to be loud and clear that if Joe Biden wants money from the House demands that the southern border is secured. It's that simple.
Before we run, Congressman, you sit on the Oversight Committee, Oversight Judiciary, and I believe Ways and Means all sent a request to Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Justice Department for the Robert Hur special counsel transcript, the 5-hour, 2-day interview with Joe Biden, and including in that all of the relevant video recordings and audio. When we've heard you expect a response maybe by Monday. Can you give us an update? And by the way, there's been some breaking news just in the last few hours. NBC reported that the president is the one who raised Beau Biden's death after being asked about his workflow at a Virginia rental home, that Robert Hur never asked him a question about it, despite the lie that Joe Biden told. But give us an update before you go on where that stands.
Well, we've requested that from the Attorney General's office, and we expect to get it. Look, with this situation here, the Oversight Committee has a responsibility to hold the executive branch accountable at all times, especially considering this criminal probe into Joe Biden's handling of classified material from before he was president. We believe Maine Justice is going to respond. They better respond, quite frankly, because if they try to shield this information from Congress, they'll shield everything from Congress. And at that point, quite frankly, Dagen, why would we give them any money?
You're here. Byron Donalds, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Congressman.